All right, if you've been running a private podcast, a members-only podcast on Transistor, you've been waiting for this for a long time. Now your listeners can listen to your private podcast on Spotify. They just click this link and they get access to your show on Spotify. I'm going to show you how it works. All right, so here in my account, I have two versions of this podcast. I have the public podcast, the Wolverines hockey podcast, and then I have a private podcast for members only. So in this scenario, members are paying to get a premium version of the feed with no ads, full episodes, etc. And I want these subscribers to be able to listen on Spotify. So I'm going to head in here, and you'll notice that now we have a distribution option here in private podcasts. Let's go into that. And right here, we can submit the show to Spotify Open Access. It's going to submit it to Spotify. We have to wait for them to approve it. All right, now Spotify has approved the show, and you'll notice I have an option here. I can keep this podcast private and not searchable in the podcast directory. So if I was going to go over to Spotify and search for this private podcast, I can either have it show up in those search results or not show up. And if you have a team-only podcast, if you have something you want more internal, then you probably want to keep this unchecked. But in my case, I want folks searching for the Wolverines podcast to see that there's a members-only feed, because in their case, I want them to upgrade. I want them to become paying subscribers. So I'm going to choose that option here. And we can preview what this looks like on Spotify by clicking this link here. And there is our private podcast. You'll see that it's locked. I can't play this show. It says I need to get access. And down here on the side, it says this is a paid episode. So now let me show you what it looks like to give a subscriber access to this show. Now, there's a variety of ways you can add private subscribers to your private podcast. You could invite them manually by putting their email address. You could upload a CSV. We also have a variety of integrations you can use. So if you have people paying for a membership, you can add them as a private podcast subscriber. But today, I'm just going to use our invite links. So let's pretend that this individual has just received an invite to the private podcast. I'm going to put in their email address, submit that. Now it's asking me to check my email. I'm going to do that. Let's refresh here. There's the email. I'm going to open that up. Welcome to the private podcast, Wolverines members only private podcast. I could either listen to the latest episode in my browser if I wanted to, or I could listen in my favorite podcast app. So let's click that button here. And it takes me to this landing page. And if I scroll down, what do I see? But a listen with Spotify option. That is my podcast app. So I'm going to click on that. It's going to ask me if I want to link my account to Transistor. I'll say yes. I'm going to agree to some terms and service. And look at that. I now have access to this private podcast here on Spotify. It's listed right there. I can click on this. And here it is. I can play the episode now. It's now unlocked. So if I clicked on this, I'd be able to hear it. So the episode is unlocked. The podcast is unlocked. Every time the publisher publishes a new episode to this private feed, I'll get it here in Spotify. I'll be able to listen to it as long as I'm a subscriber. Let's head back to the publisher's account. And if we refresh, we see our list of subscribers. We now have one subscriber, and we can see that not only have they activated and that they've listened to at least one episode, but they've activated on Spotify. So here they are. They have access to the podcast on Spotify. Now, what happens if this member, in this case, stops paying, or if they're a team member? What happens if they leave the team? What happens if you no longer want them to have access to the podcast? Well, let's remove this subscriber. And let's go back to the subscribers account and see what happens. All right, so here's the podcast. What happens when I refresh this? Oh, what's happened? I no longer have access. This podcast episode is now locked. Now that I've been removed as a subscriber, I no longer have access to the show here. The landing page I used to get access to the show will also not be available. I no longer have access to the private podcast. Now that listeners can listen to private podcasts on Spotify, Transistor's private podcast offering is so much more compelling, especially if you're offering premium content. So maybe you're using Ghost to power your memberships, and you want folks to be able to pay you monthly for your show. So in this case, using the Ghost CMS, I could charge $10 a year for access to the premium feed. People sign up with their credit card. And now I have access to the private podcast. I can open it up here and I could add my private podcast to Apple Podcasts, etc. Or I could click on here and I can once again access the podcast here on Spotify. So that's how you can use Spotify Open Access to give your subscribers the ability to listen to your private podcast on Spotify. If you're already a Transistor customer, you can create a private podcast by going to Add a Podcast to Transistor, heading down here and configuring a private podcast. Or if you're not a customer yet, head over to transistor.fm and start a 14-day free trial. Thanks.